everyone and welcome to this video. Now today I'm going to be taking a look at this album here. It's by Small Faces. It's their 1967 self-titled album. So I'll just be doing the usual thing in this video, giving a bit of background information about the album, then showing you my vinyl copy of it here, and then looking at each of the album songs in detail. So this was the band's second studio album, and it was their first on the the Immediate record label. Now by this point, the Small Faces had already made their name with a string of hit singles in 1965 and 1966 on the label Decca. Now at Decca they were under the management of Don Arden, who's a notorious record executive, infamous for his aggressive business tactics. His most infamous quote was "If I have ever exploited anyone, it's for their own benefit. It's because they wanted to be exploited." So that's the kind of guy he was. He wasn't very pleasant, to be honest. The Small Faces really were feeling the brunt of the exploitation. They were by this point they were playing lots of gigs, but they were and they had a number of big hit singles, but they weren't really getting any money for their efforts, and they were not pleased the label was also releasing music of theirs without their consent, so they threatened to leave both Arden and Decca. Now Arden tried to persuade them to stay. His tactic or plan was that he would tell their parents that they were all using drugs, which is a pretty weak deterrent, if you ask me. I mean, it was 1967, after all, who wasn't using drugs that year? But no, they did eventually just sever ties with both Arden and Decca, and were quickly signed up to Immediate Records, which was the label of Andrew Luke Oldham, who was the manager, and I think he still was the manager of the Rolling Stones at this point in time. Now their musical sound was also expanding as well. The early albums and singles had this very mod R&B style to it, whereas by this point they were moving into slightly more psychedelic influences, things becoming a little bit more variety, I call them. So both psychedelia, but also on this album you've got a bit of baroque pop, some more folky moments, I call it as well. So this album really shows a band in transition. You've also got on here Ronnie Lane becoming much more involved as a songwriter, on earlier Small Faces material. It was mostly Marriott who did Steve Marriott, who did most of the songwriting when they were writing their own songs, because a lot of their early singles were written for them or were covers, but by this point they'd really shed the covers, shed the sort of songwriters for hire and that, and were just writing their own music, which was really great to see. Now making this album did take quite a while. It took 9 months to record it, which by 60s standards was quite a while. They actually started working on this album while they were still at Decca Records, and used 2 different studios, IBC and Olympic, was where this album was recorded over late 1966 and into 1967. So this album was released, yes, on the 23rd of June in 1967. Now that was only 2 weeks after this album, which is called From the Beginning. Now this was a compilation put together by Decca, in a way to stymie the release of this album on the rival record labels. This is essentially a compilation of singles, and then also some tracks which would actually feature on this, which they had originally recorded and demoed on Decca. So on here you've got Tell Me Have You Ever Seen Me and My Way of Giving, both released on this album ahead of the release of this, and this did okay in the charts. This reached number 17, which wasn't a big hit, but this album actually did better. This reached 12, so I suppose it didn't work in the sense of making this a complete flop of an album. But despite that, this was still the Small Faces' least successful studio album here in the UK. Both the other albums, the debut and and like Odd Good to Not Gone Flake like both got into the top 5. So this, I suppose, was a bit of a commercial disappointment. But despite that, and despite the lack of any hit singles like on this album, or any singles like for like that matter like at all, this has probably gone on to be considered their best album, I would say, or certainly one of the most well regarded and most like influential like off like their works. Like certainly like a notable person who really rates this album is like Paul Weller. Like he said that this is like one of his favorite albums like of all time, like, and it's been included in various music publications, sort of like these like best of all time lists or best 60s albums lists. So I will just show you my vinyl copy of it here. Now this is a reissue of it from, I believe, the 1980s, which I bought online a couple of months ago. Originals of this, pretty impossible to find, and when you do, you're talking at least £100 for like a nice original on this, like from 1967. So yeah, like I haven't got one of those, but yeah, no, this is just a reissue of it. I believe it's from Germany. This, it's just on it's on the label. It does have the immediate logo on it, but it's called Line Records, Line Outlets. I think it might be like a budget label or something, but certainly like an 80s pressing like of it here. And yeah, that's really all there is like to like the record there. So yes, I won't go over each of the album songs in detail, so I'll score each track out of 10 and then use those scores to give us a overall percentage marking for the album.
I have a feeling that I know you.
So we kick off things with the song Tell Me Have You Ever Seen Me. Now this is a great opener to the album. This song is just pure power pop. Although it's more, I guess, acoustic, like instruments are used on it, like this kind of like acoustic guitar going right through the song. It just has such a big sound, like it really packs a punch. I think it could have, I think like it is a great song. I think it could have been even better in some ways if it was a bit more fleshed out, because a lot of these tracks are very short, very snappy, which is great kind of thing. Like, like, the last thing you want is kind of like songs that just kind of pondered on, and that. So I suppose like the fact that this is, I think, less than 2 minutes, it just keeps you wanting to come back to it. I really love it. I think you've got some great lyrics on it. I guess some lines inspired by the kind of flower power movement, like off like the time he sings on it. Many flowers are breaking through the concrete. Listen, everyone, I can hear them breathing. So you can kind of see that psychedelic kind of influence kind of coming in. But this song doesn't sound very psychedelic. It just is pure like R&B. It is more in tune with like their like earlier work that I think is like a really great track. So I would give that one a 10 out of 10.
I got something I want to tell you. I got something.
So we follow that up with Something I Want to Tell You. Now this is a really good soulful track. It's a bit more kind of laid back, this one, but you've got kind of like Ian McLagan's organ playing, kind of carrying like the song, and then Kenny Jones doing some fantastic like drumming. This one, like Ronnie Lane gets like the vocal spotlight. Now I'm not sure if he'd ever really sung much on previous Small Faces albums. I certainly don't think he'd sang on any of their singles. He might have got 1 or 2 lead vocals like on like the first album, like, but this is like where like he's really coming into his own like as a vocalist, and I think it really works. It's a great song list, and like for me would get like a 9 out of 10.
I know that I can't be lonely.
Next one up is called Feeling Lonely. Now this is a really good, very nice, gentle song. This you've got kind of harpsichord going on like throughout the track. Really reminds me quite a bit of the Stranglers song Golden Brown, just with like this kind of like very that's like propulsive like harpsichord part like to it. But then you've got some great vocals like from Maria on it. And like which just I think complement like the instrumentation really nicely. It's just a short and sweet song. This again, I don't think this even touches 2 minutes, but it's a really good track, and for me would get a 9 out of 10. Next up is called Happy Boys Happy. Now, this is a instrumental song, and again on this one you've got quite a lot of organ work like on it from Ian McLagan, but also again some really good like percussion work, not just like the drums, but you've got I think different bongos, different percussion like on it like as well. I mean, it being like an instrumental, it is slightly fillery like on the album. It's decent, but it's certainly nothing I would play in isolation like off the album. So I think for me it would get 7 out of 10 because it's enjoyable, but certainly for me like not one of the strongest tracks like on the album.
Things are gonna get better.
Next up is another really good track. It's called Things Are Going to Get Better. Now, this is a really good kind of like reassuring song. Like, again, you've got some really nice lyrics on it, like things are going to get better, times change, better late than never. Being true to myself makes me see all the more. And I think it's just, really nice, positive song, feel-good track. And I think Marriott sings it really, really, really well. Again, possibly, it's maybe not, again, one of the standouts, like, on the album, but it is really, like, enjoyable, though. So I think that, for me, that one would get an 8 out of 10.
It's all part of our way of giving.
Next one up is called My Way of Giving. Now, this is a really good track. This is a bit more of a kind of ballad, this one, more of like a kind of love song, but I think it's delivered with a lot of like energy. Again, I like the kind of contrast between like the verses where there's a bit more tension, like in like the kind of like the music, but then like the chorus which just comes in where you've got this fantastic melody, just this like really catchy, like kind of like chorus line like on it. And I think, this is a great track. Interestingly, this song was also covered by, like, Rod Stewart, like, on one of his early albums. Now, his backing band for that album was The Faces, which, of course, like, contained 3 of, like, the former members, like, of Small Faces. So, quite funny, like, they were essentially covering, like, their own song, like, with him and that. But yeah, no, like, a great track there, like, My Way of Giving. And if we would get a 10 out of 10. Okay, next one on the album is Green Circles. Now, this is probably the most psychedelic song on the album, the most experimental like track here, and I think it is really, really, really great. You've got like a lot of kind of trippy sounds in it, lots of different reverb like used like on like the track. And I think it's maybe a bit hard to make out the vocals, like in some places, but I think it's really catchy, it's really distinctive. Again, you've got this kind of flange effect, like on like the drums like which they would later use on the single, like Ichiku Park, which was only issued, I think, a couple of weeks after this album, but like as was kind of the way, like with like the 60s, that wasn't actually on like the studio album. But yeah, no, Green Circles, a really great track. Ronnie Lane takes the lead vocal on this, and yeah, for me it is one of my favourite songs there, just because it's so different, and I think it does also kind of show the way, like in some ways, so like Odd Guns Not Conflate, the kind of psychedelic vibe like of that album, I think can be kind of traced back like to this song.
Would I become like you? Yeah.
Okay, now flip over the album, and side 2 opens up with the song Become Like You, which is a really nice, more slightly folky song. This one here reminds me quite a bit like of Simon and Garfunkel, not just in terms of like the music of it, but also like the lyrics remind me quite a bit of Simon's lyrics to El Condor Pasa, like If I Could, like, because like the lyrics to this go like, I could be a brick, would I become like you? If I could give my best friend a kick, would I become like you? And yeah, we've got some good mellotron like on like the song, which kind of develops like the sound of it like as like we go on. I just think it's a really nice laid back track, and yeah, for me is a really, really good song, like another winner, and also adds some crucial variety like to the album. So yeah, for me, that one would also get a 10 out of 10. Okay, now we arrive at my favourite track on the album, Get Yourself Together. Now this is, one of my all-time favourite Small Faces songs. It's got that kind of, like kind of mod rock kind of feel, like kind of R&B feel, like off like their kind of earlier work. It's a song which I guess you could imagine them kind of having released, like say in 1965 or 1966. But I just like adore this song. I think like the lyrics are really great, and I like how they kind of tell a story. Like they kind of like there's a kind of structure to there. So kind of like on like kind of like the first bit is kind of comforting, like a girl like who's just kind of had like a breakup, like and that, like I know that you miss him. I can tell by the way you kiss him. Get yourself together and you'll be all right. But then kind of by like the ending of like the track, I guess the guy's kind of wanted the girl like for himself. Like he's kind of saying like, so if you feel that you need me, I'm here beside you. Can't you see me? Get yourself together and it'll be all right. And yeah, a great song, and also going back to the fact that I was saying that this is one of Paul Weller's favourite albums. This is a song which the Jam covered quite a bit, like in like their live sets. So yeah, a great track here though, and like that jam version was possibly how I discovered the Small Faces. I can't quite remember how exactly, but that probably would have been one of like the earliest kind of songs like I heard of theirs, and yeah, it's always been a favourite of mine. So yeah, that one would get a 10 out of 10.
I know I gotta wake up, own up, I've been.
The next one up is called All Our Yesterdays. Now, this is a slightly more different song, this. You've got kind of a lot of brass, like, on it. Again, it's a lot of brass, but also it's quite kind of vaudevillian kind of style. It's slightly, you've got this kind of slightly chaotic, like, sort of like introduction where you've kind of got Marriott kind of, like, amusingly, like, introducing, like, Ronnie Lane, like, onto like, his, like, lead vocal. I mean, it's a really catchy song, and, like, I do always enjoy it when it's on. Like, it's just for me maybe not one of the more memorable or one of the more standout tracks like on the album, but still really good though. So yeah, that would get a 8 out of 10.
It's been 3 months since I was last with you.
Next one up now is called Talk to You. Now this is a more straight ahead like R&B track. You've got a powerhouse vocal like from Steve Marriott, and I think it's a great song. Lyrically, it kind of concerns a relationship he had with a model called Chrissy Shrimpton. And it has like lyrics about him like trying to see her basically, but like he's not able to get past doormen who kind of mistake him like for like a fan. It goes sort of like, so many people trying to stop me from getting through. The doorman, he just laughed, but I don't want no autograph. Like all I want to do is talk to you. So it's a slightly amusing take and a kind of unique angle, like at the kind of traditional like sort of like kind of like love song or like kind of like sort of like like sort of like ballad basically. But I think it's a really great track. It was originally the B-side to Here Comes the Nice, which was their first immediate single. So I'm glad it finds a space on this album. My only criticism of it is that it's too short. This one, again, I think there's nothing wrong with a short song, but I think this one just fades out just a bit too abruptly. I think they maybe could have gone round again another chorus or something like on it, or like just like it kind of just sort of like almost immediately just kind of fades out and then it's kind of finished and that without a real ending. So maybe like a real ending might have like maybe like helped the song like a little bit, but I do think that's my only criticism of it. But yeah, no, I think it would still get a 10 out of 10 just because it is one of their very best songs.
I've been walking with dawn, for my sleep has been torn.
Next one now is called Show Me the Way. Now this is another Ronnie Lane lead vocal, and again you've kind of got that baroque pop like arrangement with this kind of very prominent like harpsichord like on like the track. It's a little bit slightly darker lyrically, this one, like I would say, kind of about having kind of so like slightly darker or kind of doubtful thoughts. He sings like on it like, all the truth I have known has been scattered and blown. I don't know who I am. Someone else's part I am playing. And yeah, I think it's a really nice song. I think it really like again it stands out like on the album for me. Again, adds a kind of different texture, and I think it's placed good kind of coming after kind of like the upbeat like talk to you. So yeah, Show Me the Way will get a 9 out of 10.
When you're slipping into sleep, that's the time to unwind.
And then the penultimate track now is called Up the Wooden Hills to Bedfordshire, and this is Ian McLagan's first like writing credit like on like a Small Faces album, and it's possibly for me the weakest like on the album. Like I don't want to be like too rude like to it, like too rude to it, because it's not a bad song like at all. I think it's a really good, it's a decent attempt like at like a first, like if this is the first song like he ever wrote, like I think it's a really like great track. It's inspired by a saying of I believe it was like Ronnie Lane's father, like he kind of used to kind of say like that kind of like used to say, I got the wooden hills to Bedfordshire was some kind of phrase he used for kind of going to sleep and that, but kind of like McLagan turns this into like kind of like a drug song. He sort of sings on it like, when like you're slipping into sleep, that's the time to unwind, sinking down into the deep, that's the time of no time. So yeah, it's a little bit druggy, but I like it though. And yeah, for me, we'll get a 7 out of 10 because I mean it is a good track, it's a decent song, but yeah, certainly for me, not one of my favourites like on the album.
The sunshine sees me.
And then we close the record with a song called Eddie's Dreaming, which is a really fun track, this. It's slightly fillery, though, I would say. I think it's a bit like Green Circles. It's quite psychedelic, and it certainly, I think, foreshadows this one probably more so than Green Circles. Foreshadows like the Odd Guns Not Gone Flake album. It's just like its creativity, it's like weirdness, it's kind of slightly strange and chaotic, like kind of like feel like to it. But yeah, for me, it's not one of my favourites like on the album. And yeah, again, it would get a 7 out of 10. It's not bad, it's just not brilliant. Okay, so overall, this album would score 89%. So this is a fantastic record here. I think this is a great mix of the kind of mod R&B that they were kind of known for previously, but then they're introducing more kind of pastoral sounds, more gentle songs, and I would easily rate this as the Small Faces' best studio album. They only had really like the 3 studio albums, like their self-titled debut, this one, and then Odd Guns Not Gone Flake, and I would easily put this as the best of those bunch. And despite it being 14 tracks there like we went through, this album just flies by. It's less than half an hour like in length, but it's a really a really tight record, I think, which I guess there were moments like on the band's earlier work where they would kind of go into like these R&B jams, and they'd kind of just play and kind of they could get a bit kind of like ponderous, like these kind of like this kind of like this kind of like the band jamming, where it's like on here there's none of that. These are just very tightly delivered songs, like some of the tracks you could argue are maybe a bit underdeveloped in the sense that they might only maybe say have like the one verse, like a chorus, and then that's the song. But I like it though, and I think it just the fact that these songs are so short, it does kind of leave you kind of coming back for more with it. So that's been my review of the Small Faces 1967 self-titled album. So I hope you have enjoyed the review, and I'll see you all next time for the next one. Goodbye.